Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Hey, Steph, how are you?
Doing good. So this is our episode today is going to be called "What They Didn't Teach Us in Civics." Um, Welcome back to things that we don't talk about. I'm Stephanie,
I'm Mark Daniel Lemazny.
and this is a podcast where we break open the truths hidden in plain sight. And today we're talking about something we should have learned all since we were 16. Um, what it actually means to be a citizen and why the law doesn't work the way we were told. This episode is all about jurisdiction, hidden consent, and how your silence in the system might be louder than you think. U.S. citizenship. Everyone knows everything about what we thought everything about U.S. citizenship meant. So this is what we're hitting today. U.S. citizenship is more than a checkbox. Let's start with a seemingly simple question. What is a U.S. citizen? According to 42 USC 9102, subsection 18, Mark's going to share his screen and we're going to go over that.
So a United States citizen, this is 42 USC 9102 subsection 18. A United States citizen means any individual who is a citizen of the United States by law, birth, or naturalization, any federal, state, or local government in the United States or any entity of any such government, or any corporation, partnership, association, or other entity organized or existing under the laws of the United States or of any state which has its president or other executive officers and its chairman of the board of directors or holder of similar office, an individual who is a United States citizen and which has no more of its directors who are not United States citizens that constitute a minority of the number required for a quorum necessary to conduct the business of the board.
So that was a mouthful.
That was definitely a mouthful. There is no doubt about that. But that is the legal definition of what a U.S. citizen is. So most people would say if you live in America and follow its laws, but here's the truth. This is what a U.S. citizen really is, and it's changed drastically with the 14th Amendment. So there's something that I want to clarify very quickly, because we hear a lot about the Constitution. We do hear a lot about citizenship. We hear a lot about people. And then we're going to talk about the difference between people and persons. There is a huge misconception by the general public in which people think they are persons. Unfortunately, that is not true. There is a very different distinction in the law between we the people and persons. So if you believe that they are the same thing, you need to stop that because it's not actually true. So let's take a look now at the 14th Amendment, a little more detail. So let me get that pulled up here.
As Mark stated, people versus persons, I feel like there's two different definitions for every single word. There is law dictionaries and then there's Webster dictionaries. And
Absolutely.
You can't actually get the two mixed up. So if you actually look at a law dictionary and you look up people, person, individual, corporation, all of these things, crazy enough, have something to do with each other. So that's pretty crazy, and that's what really trips people up in my experience. It's like, well, what do you mean person doesn't mean people? It's like, no, you actually have to look up the definition and see there is different definitions to people and persons.
What can be very challenging for some folks is to understand that they have a bias about what a word means and how they feel about it. So there's nothing wrong with, your perception of a word, but there is the actual definition of a word. So in order to fully comprehend and be part of this and understand this information fully, one is going to have to kind of deprogram all of that information that they had and take in the actual definitions and then kind of build it back up from there. So again, kind of taking a look here at the 14th Amendment. So this is section 1. This is one of those longer amendments. So all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
That's the important section of it.
Right there.
The jurisdiction thereof.
Are citizens of the United States and the state within they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdictions the equal protection of the laws. Okay, so what that means is that as a person, you do have certain rights. Those rights really are privileges. So you have them. You have the right to life, you have the right to liberty, you have the right to property. All of those things can be taken away from a person, but not without due process. So what it means by and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is we actually have to kind of put ourselves back in the time frame in which these laws were written. So the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment go very much hand in hand. And this is right after the Civil War. So I want everybody to imagine that they're in the 19th century, it's the 1860s or the 1870s, and we just freed the slaves. Okay, we won. The 3/5 clause is no more. All the black people are officially full people. They're 5 out of 5, not 3 out of 5. What do we do with them? Well, the problem is that when they came over here from Africa, they didn't have citizenship. The African kings gave them up, and they didn't hold any citizenship. They were property. They were no different than your couch. They were no different than your cell phone, no different than your dog. I mean, it's just the truth. They were property.
Right. So they weren't really naturalized either.
Exactly. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
So now we have just freed the slaves, and they must have citizenship. None of those people were citizens of, what is now Kenya or what is the Congo. They are, in effect, they needed some type of citizenship. So that's where the 14th Amendment comes in, and that's where the phrase "and subject to the jurisdiction thereof." So now let's take a look. What is the United States? That is a very, very interesting thing. So let me go ahead and switch up my share real quick to 28 USC 3002. So this we're looking at now is 28 USC 3002, and then specifically subsection 15A. So if we look at the United States means a federal corporation or an agency, department, commission, board, or other entity of the United States, or an instrumentality of the United States. So there it is. First day, everybody. The United States is a corporation. Does it? This is not an argument. This is 100% fact. The United States is a business, no differently than PepsiCo, no differently than Coca-Cola, than Verizon, or a business. And those people needed some type of jurisdiction, which is where the 14th Amendment came in, and that's why they're called persons and not people. So there is a very big difference between being titled as a person or being titled as we the people. It does mean something very different.
And everyone thinks that the United States is the whole country. This is a huge misconception. The United States of America is actually 10 square miles of the District of Columbia,
yep,
in which Congress resides.
Yes. And the territories like Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Like that's the United States.
Mariana Islands, absolutely. Yep. And then if you actually go back to, Mark, can you share your screen again to that?
It's the same thing, yep. 28 USC.
Yeah, 28 USC. So if you actually look, it says state means any of the several states. So that is just like a state. The District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas, or any territory possession of the United States. So states and the United States of America are two different things. And so jurisdiction, they had to come up with jurisdiction to put the slaves under.
Yeah.
Which was the 14th Amendment was really eradicated.
Think of the problem that was created by freeing the slaves. Like, obviously, it was a great situation. You know, I would never say that it's not a great situation, but let's truly comprehend the massive issue of freeing thousands and thousands of people in a land that's not actually theirs. I don't want to make that decision. That's a heck of a decision to make, and it's very challenging to do so. So that is the big misconception that I see nowadays is people say, well, it says persons. I'm a person. No, you can't enact your rights under the Constitution as a person. You don't have rights as a person. You have the privileges that are awarded to you from the United States federal corporation. And that's made very clear by the statement and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So once a person claims that they are a U.S. citizen, they are claiming that they are that corporate entity that falls under the jurisdiction of the United States, which we now know what the United States is, and thus they do not have the same rights that they once had, which would be, you know, a common law situation.
So what Mark is trying to say is that clause made everyone born in the U.S. a subject of federal jurisdiction, not state jurisdiction anymore.
Yep.
It created a new kind of citizen.
Yep.
One tied directly to Washington, D.C., which is the District of Columbia, not to the Republic of your state.
Exactly. And we know this also. There's a Supreme Court case called Dred Scott versus Sanford, 60 U.S.C. 393. It was an 1857 case. And this very clearly states where they're talking about how persons are different than people. So feel free to look up Dred Scott versus Sanford, 60 U.S.C. 393, 1857 case. And it goes further and deeper into this.
It's really where things started getting fun. You know, the court, the Supreme Court that ruled on it, it was a black man who was trying to
Black woman, actually.
A black woman who was trying to get her rights, and they had to define everything.
Yep.
It was a new time. It was a new era in this country. And it's a very interesting case.
Right. So now I want to share with you guys the legal definitions of person. So there's actually more than one. But this one is 8 U.S.C. 1101 B3. The term person means an individual or an organization. Okay, that's pretty clearly defined. Now let's look at the other definition.
Organization, it can also mean trust. It can mean corporation. It could mean
right here. So Stephanie is referring to as 15 USC 7006 subsection 8.
Yes.
The term person means an individual, corporation, business trust, state, trust, partnership, LLC, association, joint venture, government agency. I didn't know that. I didn't know government agency could be a person. Public corporation or any other legal or commercial entity. And then you also have to take into account that an individual means organization, and organization also means individual. Man, that sure doesn't sound like we the people, does it?
So by this definition, and if you compare 28 USC 3002 subsection 15, you're going to see that technically the United States is a person, which is why a person to person can judge a person.
Yeah.
You know, a person can take a person to court, but actually a person cannot take a people to court. That's fun jurisdiction talk right there.
Absolutely. So kind of moving on a little bit here and getting into the statutory law aspect versus the common law aspect. This is where we're going to get a little bit deeper into this stuff. As the United States was and is still a common law country. We were born into common law. All of our rights come from common law. Everything that we believe that we know of as a right comes from common law. And then we have what's called statutory law. So there's statutory law, and that's what most people are subject to. And these are codes, statutes, ordinances, policies. They come from the state legislature. Statutory is commercial law, and it's not based on morality, it's based on contracts. So I'll give you an example. And I think one of the most polarizing things that we talk about is the Second Amendment, right? So you have the right to bear arms. Any individual has the right to bear arms. This doesn't come from the Constitution even, this comes from God. I have the right to defend myself, I have the right to stand up for myself, and I have the ability to help try to continue my life.
Life, liberty, and property.
Exactly. So when your state, we're in Michigan. So being on Michigan, I'm going to use that as a reference. So the state of Michigan says if I want to have a concealed carry permit, that I have to go through a class and pay a license and a fee for that. Well, guys, that's not the right to bear arms, okay? Permit means permission. So why do I need to go to the state of Michigan to ask for permission to exercise a right that has already been given to me?
That doesn't make sense.
That means I don't have that right.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. You can talk about safety, you can talk about whatever you want. It's not relevant. I have a right to bear arms. End of discussion. So how can it be both ways? How can we have people sitting in jail for gun charges if they have the right to bear arms? Because they're operating under the codes and statutes and the ordinances of whatever city or municipality or township or county, Detroit, Grand Rapids, Saginaw, you just pick your city, guys. It doesn't matter. That is the big difference of statutory versus common law. So then within common laws, that's what our ancestors lived by. It's based on harm, trespass, and equity. So here's another example. I have the First Amendment right to free speech. That means that I can say anything, and it doesn't matter where I am or what's going on or anything like that. I simply have the right to free speech. Now, if I were to defame somebody or say something derogatory, that still is a right of free speech. But if I were to make a false claim against someone else, let's just say that Bob Barker punched me in the face. I can't say that if it's not true. Otherwise, I still have a right to free speech. But if I'm saying that Bob Barker punched me in the face, if he didn't do that, I'm not actually exercising right to free speech.
Now it's slander.
Yes.
Yeah, it's where's the line of actual felonious? And then what is actually how is disorderly conduct a thing?
Yeah, that's an excellent question.
If I have the right to free speech, then how do you get to say that I'm being disorderly or I'm getting a disorderly ticket if I actually have this right to say what I want to say? Even if it is swearing, even if it's F-bombs, whatever it is. It's
absolutely.
Then that's feelings taking over, superseding rights. Well, the police officer felt like you were being disorderly. Therefore, you were going to be ticketed, even though that's not actually what God gave you.
Right. Absolutely. And that is where common law says you have the right to your body, your property, your contracts, your belief. Statutory law says we'll let you keep those if you follow our rules. So that's where we see this massive imbalance. And we've all seen it. We've all heard a story or looked at a video online and you just saw somebody standing on a sidewalk recording, and next thing you know, they're being harassed and arrested, and it's typically a disorderly conduct charge. Well, guys, the best way to think about rights too is the government is not going to pay for your rights. So if I have the right to free press, I cannot actually expect the government to buy me a printing press or to buy me a computer or to buy me a typewriter or any of these things. But they cannot restrict my ability to disseminate information to the public. The only way that they could do that is if I was doing something slanderous, if I was going after and creating real injuries with my words. Not fake injuries, you know what I mean? Not oh my God, you hurt my feelings. That's the biggest load of malarkey I've ever heard. Who cares? Everybody has feelings. If we're going to talk about rights, we're going to talk about diminishing rights, we also have to talk about the fact that there is no right that you don't get your feelings hurt. I have no idea where this came from. I have no idea where people don't understand this. I have no idea why we have disorderly conduct charges, but guess what? We sure do. So the kicker is, if you don't challenge jurisdiction, then the system assumes you've agreed to statutory law because you didn't say otherwise. This is where the phrase, "I stand on my rights." It's because as a police officer or an FBI agent or a city worker, they might come up to you and say, "Hey, you're not allowed to hold that sign that says F Trump." Okay? Because it has harsh words on it. Well, no. Like, I have absolutely every right to hold that sign. I sure can if I want to.
And if we have the right to address grievances with our government, then why do we need permits to hold a picketing sign? Why do we need permission?
Yeah.
I don't.
I
I don't need permission to hold a picketing sign to address grievances with my government.
Absolutely
I do absolutely not. And that is my opinion. And it's based on a lot of fact.
It sure It really, really is.
Yeah.
It really is. So kind of move along here. Consent through silence and paperwork.
Here's how most of us unknowingly give up our rights. Signing a birth certificate or a social security application. This puts you into the system. This starts your sole prop.
Under federal jurisdiction.
Under federal jurisdiction. And this really puts you from state citizen to
U.S. citizen.
Yes. So this is where the changing of jurisdiction and putting you, right in line with what they want. It starts with the birth certificate and the soul prints when they take your soul prints at birth.
Yeah.
Soul prints is actually for the soul prop. So also filing taxes as a taxpayer, you're saying I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm a sole prop, I'm a
Yeah, absolutely.
A withholding agent, all of those special words. I'm applying for licenses, permits, and benefits, all public, all federal jurisdiction. Responding to government correspondence without qualification. Each of those actions is a form of consent. You become the trustee to a legal fiction named after you. You answer to that fiction in their courtrooms. So you go from being the beneficiary of the benefits that they have set up for you through the Social Security Administration. And now, instead of being just the beneficiary and benefiting from the sole prop or whatever they have set up for you, now you're the trustee and trustees can go to jail.
Yep.
So it is a job, and you're pretty much being put in a role that is very much punishable by law.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And just, this is everything too, guys. So like, if I have the right to life and I want to go out and I want to go fishing and I want to catch some fish so that I can feed myself and my family, why do I need a hunting and fishing license when I already have the right to life? We know as human beings, I must consume calories in order to move forward. Okay, like it's not a debate. We know this. So there is no reason for me to ask permission from any state or federal organization, which would be a fishing license, a hunting license, so that I can maintain myself. Now, if I'm going to go out on the open waters and I'm going to catch 10,000 fish to sell them to other people, of course there should be regulations for that.
For commercial reasons.
Yeah, that's a commercial product. It's not the same thing.
Are we netting? Are we overfishing?
Yeah, what's going on?
Yeah, they do need to keep an eye on how much fish you're catching and if you're actually selling it or what you're actually doing with it, because that absolutely depends on your jurisdiction. Now, what if there was a way to correct the relationship with your jurisdiction?
Absolutely. And the point of that is to reestablish yourself into your lawful position. There's a difference between legal and lawful, and you want lawful more than you want legal. So status correction isn't just paperwork, it's a mindset. It's understanding you were born with rights. They do not come from Washington. They do not come from the Constitution. They come from God.
This isn't about being anti-government. This is about reestablishing your lawful position.
It's just that simple. It really is. So when you declare your status as a private living man or woman, you're not going rogue. You're stepping back into that alignment. Okay. I'm correcting the assumption and the presumption that the government has. Guys, we got to understand the government is its own separate thing, and they really are doing things for themselves. That's where the statutory aspect comes in. That's where the major conflicts come in. So there's nothing wrong with me as an individual standing up to them saying, hey, you guys unfortunately don't have it correct. I need to correct your presumption. This is what's going on, and this is how we're going to do it moving forward.
And the law absolutely operates on two things. One is assumptions, and two is compliance.
Yes.
So if you don't comply and you change the assumptions to facts, now that's something that they have to respect and go by.
Exactly. So since our rights come from God, and we know this, we have to be able to stand up and be able to talk about equity and talk about an equitable situation. This is kind of going back to what we were talking about just a little bit ago with my right to bear arms. I have seen this so many times, and it makes me very uncomfortable when I see police officers ask the questions, do you have any weapons on you? This makes me very uncomfortable because I already have the right to bear arms. So why are you asking me if I have weapons? What does it matter if I do? Oh, well, you might have a warrant, or you might have a charge, or you might not be able to have this or that. None of that is relevant. I have the right to bear arms. What they're really asking is, have you registered your firearms? Because if you haven't registered your firearms under statutory law, I can write you a ticket, or I could seize the firearm, or I could kidnap you, or if I really felt like it, I could kill you. So why would I want to register my gun and then give up my ability to defend myself, and then on top of that also give them the authority to do everything I just said? Like, I don't understand this. And I don't understand how people have come so far away from it to the point they're just like, yeah, I'm just going to go get my CCW. The hell are you talking about? You don't need a CCW. But you have the right to bear arms. You just do. And I can understand the safety aspect too, because I hear this all the time from people where they're like, well, we need safety. We need safety. Safety is a construct that you all have created. You're going to have to break that down. There's so many ways to be safe out there. And having firearms around would be a problem if people were just randomly shooting them. So you can't say that it's safe for a police officer to have a firearm, but yet unsafe for an American to have a firearm. We both have the same ability to pull out that firearm and use it for the wrong reasons.
At the end of the day, guns are weapons, or I'm sorry, they're tools.
Yeah.
And it really is never the gun that kills people. It's 10 out of 10 people.
It's the person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So unless we're gonna, put into the Constitution that every single person or people need to have a mental eval.
Right.
The Constitution doesn't say anything about mental evals to get a gun.
And who would be the arbiter of that in the first place? Like, what's the standard for which we're going to have that?
What's the jurisdiction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and that's where the compliance aspect from the government, they expect this. Again, has anybody heard this phrase from a cop before? He didn't comply. Like, I have heard that so many times, and that has been a justifying use of force, a justifying use of excessive force, and a justifying force to take lives. He didn't comply. Guys, that's not rights then. Okay? If you want to have rights, you're not always going to have compliance. And if all you want to have is compliance, then you don't have rights. So if you want that type of a society, okay. But that's not what our Constitution says. That's not what America is. And maybe we are moving towards that, but that probably should have been discussed in a lot more detail before we just said citizens must comply.
Before we signed off on it, like, yep, I'm absolutely a U.S. citizen, count me in.
Yeah.
Being a state citizen, that's what people were, like, free white men were before the 14th Amendment was ever around or had to be created because of the 3/5 rule after the Civil War. That's what the 14th Amendment was created for. So what was around before the 14th Amendment? American state nationals. You were a state American. You hold alliance to the state, not the United States, which would be the federal corporation.
Exactly.
So being unincorporated and living on the land versus being at morality or commercial law. Being on the land, you actually get to hold your status and enforce common law for yourself and to actually reclaim your rights.
The easiest way for me to describe this to somebody who did not understand what Stephanie just said, if you are a person, you have the privileges that the United States awards you. If you are we the people, which is common law, which is what we are, then the Constitution applies to you. It is just that simple. If you are a U.S. citizen, you fall under the 14th Amendment. You fall under the jurisdiction thereof of the United States, which is the 10 square miles plus the U.S. territories. Then you get the privileges that the United States awards you under their corporate commercial aspects. Everybody else who operates under common law, we are the people, and thus we have all of the rights given to us by God in the Constitution.
Absolutely. And we live on the land.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact, law actually is an acronym. It stands for land, air, and water.
It sure does.
So jurisdiction is everything, and they just don't teach you that. And they don't teach you that you can absolutely correct your jurisdiction and live by God's law. Because in my opinion, my covenant is with God, and only God can judge me. So it's honestly just up to you and who you want to be judged by.
Absolutely, guys.
Do you want to be judged by a judge, or do you want to be judged by God?
Yep. So in our next episode, we're going to go deeper into this world, but through some different lenses. We're going to talk more about nonprofit organizations and the spiritual trap that is a 501c3. If today's message resonated with you, please send it to a friend who's questioning everything just like we are. Sorry for the delay for the second episode. Life happened, but we're going to become much more consistent and try and be releasing new episodes on Thursdays and Mondays. And remember, if you never learned it in school, maybe that was for a purpose. I am Mark Lemastny. I'm
Stephanie.
And this is Things We Don't Talk About. Thank you so much for stopping by, and we can't wait to see you on the next episode.
See you next time.
Bye.